Thank you for tuning into the Parkside Parent Podcast. I'm Robbie Lacey, the middle school pastor, and it is our mission in children and students ministries to support families as we help unbelieving students become committed followers of Jesus Christ. Today, we are glad to welcome back founder and executive director of Fieldstone Counseling, Jonathan Holmes, to answer the question, how do I help my kids build biblical friendships?
Well, Jonathan, thank you for joining us on the Parent Podcast for Parkside. We're so glad to have you with us, and we're just going to jump right into our question here. One of the most common things that parents come to me with, one of their concerns is that they really want their kids to have good friends, and they want their kids to have friends at church and at school who are a positive influence. And a lot of Christian families are really concerned that their their kids have friends who are fellow believers. Now, one of the obvious challenges in that is that parents can't ultimately control who their kids gravitate towards. So my question for you, Jonathan, is parents try and have a good and appropriate influence on their kids' lives and on their friendships. How can parents help their kids build biblical friendships?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here and to be able to just think out loud with you and really learn from you. I think that you and the rest of the team at Parkside just do such a great job with students. And, you know, the question about friendships and kids, I mean, it's a great question. One of the things that I think has been fascinating, I don't know if you've heard this as well, Danny, but a lot of parents, I think, when COVID first hit, you know, kids are so tech savvy, they're so up with technology, they connect with their friends online, and there was maybe the sense of, hey, you know, this actually won't hinder friendships. They're so used to doing friendship in a mediated way through technology. But what I actually found was the exact opposite. Parents found their kids even more isolated. The social technology, the media, et cetera, actually wasn't enough in COVID to facilitate and promote friendships. And so we're getting calls from parents saying, hey, my kids are lonely, they're isolated, they're anxious, they're depressed. And so I think it really has encouraged all of us as parents to say, hey, we actually need to come back to the drawing board and have a fresh conversation with our kids about biblical friendships. And I think it's been a good opportunity to maybe do a little bit of reset with our kids and with our teens about what friendship is for, what's it designed for. And so for me, that's always the first starting point. I think a lot of teens don't understand what friendships are for. They typically think, hey, it's, you know, I need a buddy, I want somebody to hang out with, you know, it's somebody to goof off with, to play video games with. And what happens is friendship becomes very me-oriented. It's about my needs. It's about how you help my popularity. It's about how you help keep me from being lonely. And I think those can all be okay things. Like, that's not a bad part of friendship. But I think a lot of kids have no clue what friendship is designed for and who it's supposed to point towards. Meaning that friendships are about telling the story of the gospel because we're made for a relationship, and that they're about Jesus Christ. And honestly, one of the first things, Danny, that I normally talk to parents about is, hey, it actually starts with you. If you want to help your kids build biblical friendships, it's a little bit of a convicting question for us to say, hey, how are your friendships doing in life? Because I think a lot of it is caught before it's taught.
Yeah, that's really good. One of the things that I think I've noticed is exactly what you're saying, is there's this idea that so many of our kids and these students are connected through social media, and there is that thought that, you know, that can exist in a pandemic. But I think what's been revealed as I've talked to students and parents is that students and children are actually realizing kind of how those things are just a cheap version of what real friendship is supposed to be. And one of it was kind of a surprise, but we've actually now, as we've been opening things back up, while things haven't been completely back to normal, I think that we've actually seen students and children who have never been involved before are now getting involved, I think because of that natural desire that they have for true, genuine, non-superficial relationships, and they're realizing kind of the vanity of, you know, social media is a fine thing, but it can't be a replacement for real biblical gospel friendship. And so all those things that you're saying, I think, have resonated with our experience as youth pastors and as we deal with children's ministry. One of the questions that I think goes along with this is I think one of the things that we believe with students at Parkside is that it is essential that students have biblical friends who are, if you've trusted in Jesus, you need to have brothers and sisters in Christ who are an influence on you, who you can do mutual discipleship with. But we also believe that Christians should be friends with unbelieving people as well. I think often parents can face the difficulty of trying to strike that balance of whether their kids only are friends with all Christians, and so there's not even anyone in their lives that they could evangelize or tell about Jesus if they wanted to. Or on the other side, like you have a kid who all their friends are friends from school, they don't connect with anybody at church, so they don't have a positive Christian friend influence in their life. Do you have any suggestions on how parents can help their kids and their students strike that balance of Christian and non-Christian friends?
Well, I think, Dana, you bring up such a good point of interaction because, as you know, some parents are more prone towards a lot of control over who their kids hang out with and who they're friends with. Other parents are a little bit more hands-off. A lot of parents want their kids to have really good Christian friends, and they have only unbelieving friends. And obviously, we have a push at Parkside to want to see unbelieving people become committed followers of Christ. So we absolutely believe in the value of building relationships with unbelievers. So one of the things I'd encourage parents and kids to look towards is Christ's example. Always look to Christ. He is the best friend, and he's the model for friendship. And I think what you see is that he obviously engages unbelievers. He had conversations with them. He eats meals with them. He goes on trips with them. He teaches them. He interacts with them. He's not in a holy huddle. He's not completely isolated from them. But if you look at the people that he surrounds himself closest with, there are these concentric circles of intimacy and friendship, primarily with his disciples and maybe with a few other people that we hear and see about in the Gospels. But the people that are in the inner circle are going to be people that I think we want to make sure share our values, share our beliefs, and share our commitment to the gospel. But that in no way means that we can't have friendships and enjoy common activities with unbelievers. A simple activity that you could do with your kids is maybe just get a piece of paper or on a dry erase board or something like that, and just draw out some concentric circles and put the kid's name in the middle and say, hey, let's talk about some of your friendships. Who would you put maybe on this outward circle? Maybe somebody you'd say, hey, you see at school, they're just an acquaintance, but maybe you wouldn't hang out with them on a day-to-day basis. And then just start to move in and begin to ask your kid questions about, hey, who's in the inner circle? Why are they in the inner circle? How do they get there? How do they stay there? What's good about them being there? How do they influence you for Christ? How do they maybe drag you away from Christ? 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, bad company corrupts good morals. And so trying to help maybe kids even visualize who's where, kind of who's on first, that could be a wonderful opportunity for conversation with your teen.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. And I think the thing that you're kind of highlighting there that I think is so important is a continuing, ongoing conversation with your kids. And as you know, our big thing that we want to just keep hammering home is that parents are the primary disciple makers of their kids. And that process of discipleship is a labor of love, and it is something that takes time, it takes investment. If you want to have an influence a right influence on the kids that spend time with your children and your students, I think that you have to be making that investment and showing them that you care and showing them how you're thinking about it and showing them why you think that's important. And just like you said earlier on, that you are modeling that biblical friendship for your kids. So Jonathan, thank you so much. This has been such a helpful conversation, we hope, for parents. And we know that this is going to be a unique conversation for each student and each child of the parents in our student ministry. So I just want to encourage any parent who's listening, if you need help to continue thinking through this, reach out to me or to Robbie or to Kelly Coy or to Jonathan Holmes, and we would be glad to talk with you about these things and help you figure out what it looks like to build biblical friendships for your students and children. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for listening today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and please check out the show notes below for more resources regarding the topic we covered today. And tune in next week when I'll get the chance to interview one of our middle school adult leaders, Michael Kurth, and ask him the question, why serve in student and children's ministry?